Well, Pete, it's nice to sit down and catch up
Thanks,
with you.
man.
Tell us some of the things you've been up to, because I know you work with lots of different schools, you travel, so sort of catch us up on where has Pete Hall been?
Sure. It's been really exciting, the work I've been doing with schools and districts across the country. My work is focused on capacity building. So really what I'm doing is I'm working with everyone from teachers to administrators, school level folks, district level folks, building their capacity for success. So whatever we can do to help them endure and create the kind of excellence, the kind of effectiveness that we want in a school system all the way across the board.
Do they know, when you say capacity, it makes me think about an assumption that maybe I have the same concept of what capacity might look for me, or for you, or for colleagues, that sort of thing. How do you help people define what their capacity is so that they can sort of see that and then go beyond?
Sure. One of the first things we want to do is we want to define the term capacity. A lot of folks have what they believe is a good understanding of the term capacity, which is the amount of something a container can hold. For instance, I'd like to talk about the heart's capacity for blood. There's a finite amount of blood you can put into a heart. Really, though, when we talk about the capacity work in schools and our potential, we want to talk about the ability to grow and expand and develop. So we talk about the heart's capacity for love, for instance, in a very poetic nod. So really, then we get after the idea of we're always striving for improvement. We're always trying to be better. We're always building our skills. We're always building our expertise. And as long as we're always looking at what that next step is, it doesn't really matter where we are. It's that we're headed forward and we're building and we're expanding and growing.
Now, change can be hard for people, and I know it often gets sort of blown out of proportion in education, that we think from the outside that, well, it's a field that doesn't really welcome change that often. So how do you handle that in the same conversation about capacity building? Because obviously I would think that change is a part of that.
Well, change is not just a part of improvement. Change is a prerequisite for improvement. In fact, if you want to do better, if you want to get greater results, if you want to run faster, if you want to have more of your students succeeding in algebra, then you've got to change something. Something has to give, something has to change along the way, whether it's an input process in order to get that output. So we embrace the notion of change, not just for the sake of change, but well thought out, well prepared, very intentional changes that are going to lead towards growth and improvement.
Tell me about the feedback when you're done working with a group, right? They come in, they're going to work with you and some colleagues on maybe capacity building, these sorts of things. I would imagine that they exit saying, wow, I didn't realize that, one, this would be the experience, or this is what I would learn about myself. What kind of feedback do you get from your audience, from the audience in general?
Well, I think the most profound feedback that we get is that folks are so ingrained in the way that they do business, they don't realize that that's actually an outcropping of the way that they think. And the work that we've really been focused on and centered on is the idea of building the way that we think about the work that we do. So we engage in this process of investigating what we call the reflective cycle. So are we aware of our reality? Are we acting intentionally in order to achieve a certain means or a certain end? Are we assessing the impact of those actions, and then do we respond accordingly? And folks, when they kind of start peeling back that onion to realize what they've been doing all these years and what work is a result of their thinking, it's really interesting that folks are saying, man, I didn't even realize that I was thinking in that way, or I hadn't even thought of that before. And as we're kind of opening that up, then folks are realizing how they can be more intentional and more thoughtful and more reflective in their process.
Tell me about this work with teacher preparation, or is that something that's happening? Because I would think there would be immense value in that, in developing the next generation of educator.
Well, I would love to see it happening more, so that we have an army of teachers coming into the ranks ready to go and very thoughtful and very intentional and very reflective. I don't think it happens enough, and I don't think it happens enough in pre-service programs or in schools or in induction programs or in 10-year, 15-year, 20-year veteran teachers. We just don't spend enough time being really, really aware of our thinking and really, really aware of the processes that lead us to the actions that we're taking.
Is that because for some, it's a challenge to sort of quantify what it means to reflect? How do we assign data to that? How do we put that in a box? Not saying that's the right thing to do, but it seems like we tend to go in those directions where we can just neatly organize what we're doing and why we're doing it. Where when we're reflecting, it's more of a fluid process.
Well, and the other piece of that is that reflection isn't something that happens just at the end. So we don't wait until our work is over to reflect on it. And a lot of folks tend to, kind of interpret reflection as something that happens to determine, well, did that work or did it not work? Was it good? Was it bad? And then move on. We want to be reflecting throughout. So when people say, well, I don't have time to reflect, and that's the biggest thing I hear is, when do you reflect? I don't have time for that. I'm swamped. I got this, I got that, I got the other. Well, we talk about you got to be reflecting all the time. So reflecting during your planning, you got to be reflective about your goals, you got to be reflective about the materials you need, your curriculum, your students, the present levels of performance. You have to have all that on board before you even launch into what are the learning targets, what are the activities I'm going to design, and then whether or not it's having an impact on the students. There's reflection happening throughout. And so what we're trying to do is develop folks' thinking habits. We want to have them get into the habit of reflecting before, during, and after lessons.
What about for kids? I had a conversation recently with a professional who talked about, being able to fail and experience that, but that we don't often provide opportunities for kids to do that. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about what would it be like to be a kid who could experience that, but also reflect on that too. Mm-hmm. Because, if kids do experience that in school, some of those kids become teachers, right? And that becomes part of just that way of thinking, the way of doing. What is your thought on kids being able to reflect through their educational journey?
I think it's essential. And I think that like any skill, reflection can be developed and needs to be taught and practiced and learned. So we need to make sure that we're taking the time to kind of take the lessons that we're learning as professionals and as adults and feed them to our students so that they have the opportunity to practice and learn and develop those skills just like we do as grown-ups.
So how has this impacted your own personal circle? I mean, do you find that you're reflecting more in your own family life with your friends? I mean, I would imagine it's hard to turn off when you're not just in an educational environment.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many things that I am much more aware of. For instance, shopping, just going grocery shopping. I used to know that there was stuff, all over the store that I needed to buy so that and I would have a list for my wife and I'd buy the stuff. Well, now I'm realizing that there can be a pattern to going through the aisles of the store, and then I'm not yet to the point where I can shop for more than one meal at a time, but I'm close.
You're getting there.
And I realize that I start using the language as I'm talking about this of I'm unaware in certain regards, I'm conscious of certain things, I'm taking action here, and I'm refining my thinking, which are the 4 steps of our continuum of self-reflection. And they live and exist in all elements and all aspects of our life. So yeah, I talk about that with my kids, with my family, and that's just, it's a curse maybe. Now I'm really aware of my thinking and the thinking of the folks around me.
What about looking back on the younger Pete Hall when you first entered education? When you reflect back on that, how do you think about how prepared you were, the way that you looked at sort of the world of your profession, and how maybe you would not do it differently at all, but just that how you might sort of alter that path maybe with the knowledge you have at this point?
Well, sure. If I could Monday morning quarterback my career, it would be fantastic. So I got a little twitch when you asked me about my earlier years. I want to go back and apologize to the kids I had. I think I was a decent teacher just because of some of the natural things that I brought to the table in the classrooms. But I don't think I was excessively intentional. I don't think that I was highly reflective. I didn't know what I didn't know. As a new teacher just getting on board, and even a couple years in, there were still a lot of things that I didn't know. And I would love to go back knowing what I know now and be able to redo some of that work. But that's impossible. And so I appreciate the fact that all the experiences I had have led me to this point where folks hopefully across the country can learn from my mistakes and have learned some of the things that I had to learn the hard way, and they can learn it the easy way.
So then let's take that one step further. You were also recognized as an educator. I mean, you achieved at the highest levels. So what does that say, sort of big picture, about the things that maybe we recognize? Because you're saying to me, when I look back, maybe there were things I could have done with a little bit more intention, these sorts of things. That are we able to identify those practices that make the most significant difference in the classroom, or do we need to even do a better job of that?
Well, I think that's the ticket right there, is figuring out, quantifying them, naming them, and being able to replicate them. is really what we want to be able to do. So whether we're talking about best practices in the classroom, whether we're talking about best leadership practices, some things we do innately and some things we do out of routine or because it seems like the right thing in the moment, and we can't necessarily say, this is what happened, this was the context in which this was happening, and here's why I took this avenue, and here were the results. We can't always say that unless we're conscious of it, unless we're thinking about that process along the way. So as we build our reflection, we can then name what we're doing and identify why we're doing it and whether or not it's working.
So teach, reflect, learn. Is there another book inside? Do you have one bubbling to the surface?
Oh, there's plenty. There's a lot going on. We've just finished the manuscript for a principal leadership and for folks who support principals. It's called The Principal Influence. That's the working title. I've co-authored a book with a mental health specialist about creating a trauma-sensitive environment that we're really, really excited about. That should be coming out early 2016.
Well, keep busy.
Trying.
We all benefit. Thanks,
Trying.
Pete.
Absolutely.